Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special project webinar. My name is David Johnson. I'm the CEO of LEOcrowdfunding, and we put these on periodically as we are about to launch new projects on our platform. So thank you for joining tonight, and by all means take notes. This will be recorded, so if you do want a recording, contact us and we can ensure that you have access to that. So tonight we have a special webinar which is about the Old Woollen Mill project, and delighted that the fundraiser Suzy Jenkins has joined us. So good evening, Suzy. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you, David?
I'm doing very, very well indeed, very well. And I'm sure you've had some beautiful, glorious sunshine down in your part of the world today.
We have. It's made a very nice change. All the daffodils smell glorious today. It's lovely.
Excellent. Yeah, we had a furry bit over here in my part of the world as well, so all pretty happy. So let me just kick off before we dive into the project. If there happen to be any sort of new guests on tonight who aren't normally part of our platform, perhaps you've just registered recently. My name is David Johnson. I'm the CEO of what is an equity property crowdfunding platform, LEOcrowdfunding. I run this platform with my business partner, Aisha Afori, and we effectively help fundraisers, people who have property projects, raise finance for their deals. And tonight, this is a project webinar, so it's specifically about a deal, which is a Planning Uplift deal. And we're going to get into the numbers, have a conversation with Suzy, who is the fundraiser, and this is an opportunity for potential investors to deep dive into the project. Not only look at the numbers, but also get a chance to interact with who tonight is Suzy, ask some questions. So if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A. We don't use the chat box, so please put it in the Q&A. And tonight, Brenda is on, so thank you, Brenda, for joining us. And she's going to look after the questions, and then we'll stop and allow questions to be asked. So please put your questions in. If we run out of time in terms of questions, then we can send those out by email to all the attendees. So if you do ask a question, it's not answered, don't panic. We will follow up by an email. Suzy can answer the questions in writing, and we'll make sure everyone gets a hold of that. Now, just as a bit of a prelude, just so everyone's clear that we're talking tonight about equity investment, and LEOcrowdfunding is an appointed representative of a company called Sharon Limited, which is authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Now, pitches for investments are not offered to the general public, and investments can only be made by registered investors on the basis of information that we're providing. So it's just to highlight that at the start. We operate in a regulated environment. Nothing we say tonight should be taken as investment advice. And I just want to make that caveat very clear from the start. So the project we're talking about tonight, and I've been really looking forward to tonight, really excited by this particular project. I've always loved projects that have a bit of character, have a bit of history, and we have that in abundance tonight with this particular project. So it's called the Old Woollen Mill. I'm not going to steal any of Suzy's thunder regarding the location, but the raise amount is 155,000. That's the maximum amount. The minimum is actually 65,000. So 65 min, 155 max, and the projected return on this project is 50% per annum, and we'll be explaining that in more detail. Now, just to highlight right at the start, 50% per annum is sort of higher than what most people would look at when it comes to property return. This is not a development. This is not a refurb of an HMO in that sense. This is a planning uplift project. So what Suzy is doing is she's raising the amount of funds she needs to submit a planning application. So this is higher risk than the normal development or HMO refurb. So because it's higher risk, it also offers a higher reward. So just want to make that really clear to people. This is not the sort of investment that you invest in if it's money that you can't afford to lose. capital is at risk in a project like this, but then the rewards are attractive, which is why there is that risk versus reward. So wanted to make that very clear at the start. Now, our platform is very much geared to learning, helping people understand property, learn more about property. In our very name of Leo Crowdfunding, it's learn, earn, and own. And in this project, Suzy, as you'll hear, has been quite willing to turn this into what we call an educational project. So people can invest in this project. The minimum raise investment amount is £100. So people for £100 can sort of travel with Suzy and her team on this journey, and they can learn how a planning uplift project works from start to finish, because you're effectively a shareholder in the deal. So there's a really good opportunity, an exciting opportunity to literally effectively partner with Suzy and her team in delivering this project. So keep that in mind as we go through. This is an education learning opportunity. So without any further ado, Suzy, I know you're chomping at the bit. You're all excited to get talking about your project, I know. So welcome tonight. I think first of all, you need to give a bit about your background, you know, sort of probably from education through your work, how you get into property to where you are now, please.
It's one of those long stories that I will try to put nice and succinctly. The first wall I knocked down, I was about 8 years old, because my family have always developed property. I don't think apart from the once, we've never lived in a new house. Everything has needed work doing. So I was brought up to know how to use a hammer, particularly a sledgehammer, and wallpaper and paint and carpentry. But I was a scientist, so the side of me that thought that was a more profitable and better career went down that route. But also thinking that anything you do in life, you need to know business management. So I did a degree in science and business management. I fell into building because we had someone working on our house who needed my help with one of his clients. I helped him, and he said, look, you already know a fair amount about building. I think you should train yourself and become a proper professional builder. You have everything you need. So I said, well, okay. He said, first thing I'll teach you is how to be a bricklayer. Oh, okay, that definitely. So that's where I started. But I loved carpentry. So I mithered a bit, and he said, well, all right, then I'll get a chippy to train you. So I learned carpentry joinery. Really loved that. And used to fall out with him about whether a wall should be built out of brick or built out of timber. And then I really found my love of roofing, because you sit up there in the sky, fabulous view, peace and quiet, everything else goes on underneath you. So I would say my favourite job on site is probably roofing, but I don't get to do it as often as I'd like anymore, because now I manage. So from there, I began managing and managed bigger and bigger projects. Started out doing small builds where we were working with joint venture partners, changing their ex-council houses into flats, and various other different similar things that enhanced their income from their property. We then did more new build, and I dabbled a little bit into the commercial world before going to work for other people to broaden my experience. So the last two jobs I've done have been very interesting. One was to build the homeless shelter in Floyd's Row in Oxford, which was not just a shelter, it was an engagement hub. So it was to try to help people get off the streets and have a proper new life. Yeah, thank you, David. That one was very different from the normal winter sleeping shelters, all sorts. They have a treatment room in there, and they allowed people to take their dogs in, which was fairly revolutionary. Before that, there's one in the bottom right-hand corner, which is a listed building. Well, listed buildings are my passion, but the jobs to work on them commercially don't tend to come up so often. They're fairly already filled by other people. Floyd's Row, which is the building on the left, so second in from the right, overlooks Christchurch Cathedral. My site office had the best view in Oxford, I think. And therefore was surrounded by the beauty of the listed buildings, and we had to be careful what we did on the outside, so that although it wasn't listed, it was still a conservation area. We had a thatched building right next to us, which was the visitor centre for Christchurch College. So it put together everything that I'd gradually built up experience-wise.
Yeah,
I
excellent.
then did a special educational needs school.
Yeah, so let me just
again,
let me just dive in there, because I know you've got a really extensive background, and if people want to know more about Suzy's background, and you can tell she's very passionate about the projects she's been involved in. If you're registered on our platform, where you normally download the equity offer document, you'll see a separate download, which is Suzy's track record, and it goes into a lot more detail on some of the projects that she's mentioned here now, and a whole load more projects. So rather than spending too much more time now on that, you know, go onto the platform, and you can download that. Now, before we get into the project, I have to ask you, I know we had you on our weekly webinar a few weeks ago, being sort of not, let's say, your typical person you'd find on a building site, perhaps being a brickier or a roofer. How have you enjoyed the journey of being a woman on what may be classed as a man's world? I know it's changing, and I want to run the risk of the PC police asking this question the right way, but I know you've got some fantastic stories and different experiences you've had, but just in very brief, how have you dealt with that kind of going into that environment, and how have you enjoyed that?
I think it's called sense of humour and very broad mind, isn't it? If I tell the stories, then we will be in trouble. But some of them, yeah, it is just a sense of humour. Everything, I think every problem in the world can be solved if you can find a way to laugh about it. And my whole management style is to try to make everybody around me happy, which isn't always possible, obviously, but if we can start and finish the day with something funny, then we're all good.
You can write a book at some point about your experiences on the building site. That would be interesting.
Oh, I could.
Okay. Okay. So
the trouble is, it wouldn't be PG, would it?
That's I'm sure you've got some interesting stories. So listen, project summary. Let's get straight into this then. So why this project? How did you source it? Sort of update on where the project is right now, and where you want to take it to. Just to take about a minute and a half, just hit it sort of bullet point, because you want to get sort of deep diving into the project.
Well, I can't take the credit for finding it. The credit has to go to my mum. We would blame my father because he has said for years, find me a watermill. He meant a cottage with a mill wheel, but we found him a watermill. So we were doing a search for a watermill in Devon, and this popped up. And my mum turned the screen to me and said, look, I found you a watermill. I said, well, why have you found me a watermill? That's for Daddy. No, this is a little bit of a big one. And we said, no, look at it. Anyway, we did a bit of research into what it had, what it was, and it became more fascinating the more we looked. It used to power North Taunton with hydroelectric power in the days before steam. And it was a very vital part of the community. My mum very cleverly managed to put the deal together and secure the option, which we have now extended. So our current situation is that we've spent several months getting all of the flood reporting done and various surveys, which have to be done at different points in river flow and all sorts. And luckily we've had a lot of rain. So we've managed to do some high river level reporting as well. So we've got very accurate flood assessment, because when you're building in an area where the water is supposed to flow through it, you've got to be a little bit more careful than your average development. We very much favour brownfield development sites. It's something we've done before, because why would we build on our green fields when we've got places like this crying out to have something done with it? So it ticks all of our boxes, because it's a listed building, the mill itself. It's a watermill for my father. It's a brownfield site. It previously had planning permission, but the development was not really a nice one. So we said, okay, let's see what we can do to make this beautiful again and really work in the current environment post-COVID. We're very environmentally conscious anyway, and I'm becoming more and more so, and the more I read, the more I worry about it. So this is where the idea was born that the new build development alongside the mill should go towards the active house model.
Okay. Well, we'll come on to the active bit in a minute. So just explain briefly the location. So North Taunton, obviously it's a very picturesque village town location, but again, just that people understand the location and the benefit of being here.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues we've found moving to Devon is its inaccessibility in some places. You look at a location and say, well, it's only a few miles from such and such, but those few miles take some driving. So in assessing a project and where is a good location to be building, this was one of our first things that we look at. Every village or town in Devon is beautiful. North Taunton has got some very interesting history that I'll get to in a minute, but the fact that it is halfway between both sides means that you've got access to beaches on either coast. It's very close to Exeter, which has the airport and the main rail link into London. The beauty is that now they're opening up the line through to Oakhampton. So actually there's a mainline train station even closer. That's a very recent announcement by the government. The A30 is the main road that links up to the M5. And once you're on the A30, it doesn't take very long at all to get anywhere. It's when you come off the A30 and go down into Cornwall or down into various places that you lose the time. So this is a beautiful location because it is right in the countryside on the edge of Dartmoor, but very quick to get to the A30.
I know you were doing a little bit of research, you were saying, and you had some interesting discoveries.
I did. You see, I can't fight the fact that Cornwall has poldark, but Jam in Jerusalem, which was Jennifer Saunders' programme, was filmed in North Taunton. The late poet laureate, I have to read my list because I get my names right. The late poet laureate Ted Hughes and his ex-wife Sylvia Plath both lived in North Taunton. Now I've heard of both of those, her as an author and him as the poet. But far more topical, Dr. William Budd. He was one of the people who worked out that waterborne toxins cause disease and how to control pandemics a very long time ago. And I thought when I was looking at this, I was thinking, well, that's rather topical, isn't it?
Yeah.
And North Taunton, North Taunton has everything you need.
Yeah, absolutely, no question. That is definitely topical. So yeah, so people can Google the location and
they can. I mean, there's pizza, there's chips, there's bowling, there's fishing, there's cinemas up the road. There are plenty of pubs. You know,
fantastic.
What more could you want?
Fantastic. Okay, so let's get into the project details. So again, let me remind everyone, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and then we'll be pausing in a few minutes, and we'll deal with the questions that have come in so far. So any questions at all, for Suzy or on the project, or again about equity crowdfunding, get it into the Q&A, and I'm sure by answering those, it'll benefit everyone who's on the webinar tonight. So, okay, Suzy, project details. So explain the actual project that you're involved in here.
Okay, so previously the site had planning for a development which was all of the listed buildings being converted into houses and flats. And then all around the outside of it were new builds, a mixture of houses, flats, a few flats, and some eco houses. So the phase 1 has already been submitted pretty much as it was, because there is only so far you can take a listed building. There wasn't anything particularly wrong with it. So that's in, and that's currently being examined. But the council obviously will want to know what is happening with phase 2 before they progress that one much further. So phase 2 previously had planning for the houses, and as I say, a few flats and some eco houses. But the houses themselves were very box-like, a lot of semis, very tightly packed in together. And we didn't feel that that was really the right thing to be doing, A, for the site, or B, for how everybody's lives have changed in COVID. The more research we do, the more it's coming out that sustainable developments that give you a bit of space, a bit of light, and a much nicer living environment are going to be far more marketable. Then we did a little bit of due diligence and went, wow, the actual costs of the houses, the difference in GDV is fairly massive, and they're sold. Whereas if you want a box house, a normal modern development house, there are plenty, because all the big guys are down here. Everybody wants to move to Devon at the moment, or Cornwall. So phase 2 is we're about to start actually designing the layout of the site and working out how it works so that everybody has the right amount of space and the right amount of floor space in the house. But we believe in using everything. So there won't be a massive loft. There'll be rooms up there, because that's how you get the best view. And active houses are just a shade better than your average, because the whole point behind an active house is that not only do they generate their own power, but they over generate power in an ideal world. So even if all we can do is allow the residents of North Taunton to be able to charge electric cars on our site through a sustainable green source, which will either be the hydroelectric or solar, or maybe something else that I discover along the way, then that is the active house principle, but also will benefit the community, which is what we're all about. The other thing is that everything they use is sustainably sourced and the best you can use for your living environment. I have a passion about wool insulation, and it's a woolen mill, so it has to factor. Wool insulation pulls all the toxins out of the air and regulates the condensation, plus it's fireproof, all of which are fairly topical. I think if you can build a house that cleans its air quality itself, then why aren't we? Why are our farmers struggling to sell fleeces, and we're putting non-recyclable materials in our walls and destroying the environment while we're doing it? So again, that's another side to the active house principle. It's everything should be as sustainable as possible.
Yeah,
but it's
I
also
think if I just jump in there, I think you make a really good point regarding the active housing. There's no question that sort of post-COVID, people have recognized that the potential of being stuck back in a house again for months on end during lockdown. It might happen again next year, the year after, and certainly the demand. I mean, you just look at the information, the property publications, the demand for houses, this type of housing, with the light and the whole sort of mental health and well-being into the design, as well as the location of Devon and Cornwall. I mean, it just plays in very well to what is the demand sector at the minute.
It does. And when you think that the being just a few miles away from Dartmoor, people are going to want the outdoor lifestyle. And you come back from being out on the moor, lock yourself up into a box of a house, the first thing that is it's just going to feel as though the walls are coming in on you. So therefore, really, there needs to be a different offering. My team.
Yeah. So you've obviously you're the principal. I know your mum comes from a development background and has many years experience. And she's there in the background with you. But in terms of delivering, particularly a planning project, sometimes planning is less about the actual fundraiser and more about the people working with them.
Very much so. Yeah.
So again, just explain who your main core team is behind this application.
Yeah, I think it's also particularly important in Devon that the people are known and trusted. Devon is still not quite the same as some of your other more commercially minded planning authorities. So Eric is local. He knows the local planners, as does Chris, the planning consultant. They work as a team under normal circumstances anyway, aside from me. Eric is also Passive House accredited. So even though I'm going a stage further with the active house, he still knows how to design a house from the beginning so that it works. And that again is very important. A lot of design of this style of house, if it's not done from the very beginning and all of the fabrication, etc., taken into account right from the start, it doesn't work properly. So I've chosen an architect that understands exactly where I'm coming from with the principle behind what I'm trying to do, but also is local, knows the local area and knows the local authority. And again, Chris, the planning consultant, he's worked a lot down here and has a very respectful relationship with the planning authority.
Okay.
He's had several planning authorities in court so far this year because they've delayed granting applications, and he's had them in court to get their clients' costs back.
Okay.
And he has actually won 4 out of the 5. Last time I spoke to him, he'd won 4 of the 5 cases.
Okay,
So,
no, that's good. Good to know his background. And then on the marketing side,
because Mel's the beauty. Mel is the beauty behind it all, and is a very highly experienced land agent. She's worked with all of the big prestige estate agents in the area, and has a lot of clients herself, private clients, developers, all sorts. So she knows the very best places to market, how to present it, has a team at her disposal to do anything that I need doing to make something look better or show better, whatever. The idea is that when we're going through the planning process, because Eric can do all of the CGI, we will have a walkthrough of the site from the beginning, so that when the planners go to look at it, they can actually see exactly what we're doing every house, apart from the self-build plots. So every house will be there, which also helps all of the neighbours to assess the impact on them. The villagers of North Taunton see what's happening and hopefully buy into the way it sits with the listed buildings, because that's just as important, that what we design works with the listed buildings. So hence part of the roof shapes and all sorts, that's all a nod to the shape of the existing buildings. And then Mel will present all of that, and find the best way. But because we'll have a website that links to all of the CGI for the planning consultation, it'll also mean that anybody who's interested can go and have a look at that, and there'll be a side to it where they can actually register an interest. So Mel's already working on this with us.
Okay, that's a very important point you make there about a project website that people can actually look at, be they community, be they planners, and that's a really smart move, I think, in doing that. Okay, we've got to deal with financials, and then we'll pause and take the questions that have come in, and then look to wrap up in around about 15 minutes time if we can. So in terms of the financials, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the financials. First of all, though, a big part of the financials is the timeline. So on the screen now are really the key milestones. So raising the finance, obviously you want to be in funds in April, you're doing your reports. I mean, I think the timeline much,
as I mentioned before, we've got the flood report.
It does. So it's all there. So looking
some of the reports we can't do. Some of the reports can't be done until the end of April because, for example, some of the summer ecological reports. So hence that extends into May. The idea is that all of the reports go in with the planning application. Everything is there on their desk when they first open it. So that there is nothing that they can say, well, hang on, you haven't submitted this. We want to tick every box when it goes in and have a walkthrough available.
Yeah. Okay. So let's deal with the.
Should it get kicked back?
Yeah, let's just deal with one thing quick, Suzy, first. The 12 months versus 24 months, because investors will want to understand. So the 12 months is the normal approval we've allowed for, if you like, that first round. You submit the application, and you're allowing 12 months. I mean, it should be October, November potentially, but sometime around October, November, December. What you're saying is
26 weeks. It should be 26 weeks, as it says there on the left-hand side. Should be 26 weeks.
Okay.
And any delay on that, Chris will jump on it straight away, and in will go the appeal. But if it goes through in the 26 weeks, which we hope it will, because if it's presented as we expect, it's already in the neighbourhood plan. They're expecting it. They know it's coming. And in fact, I think they're really anticipating it coming. They're quite excited. I'm hopeful that will be it. Will be done in those 26 weeks.
Yeah, but
if not, then there's the appeal process,
which is why you've allowed the extra 12 months, which means if you like, you're planning on a 12-month project, but you've allowed for the possibility of it going 24 months.
I have, because you never know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay,
it's risk mitigation, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's a very, very important part. So let's deal with the financial sort of high level. Now, of course, if I stressed everybody, the webinar tonight is not designed to get into the real minutiae of the finances. The equity offer document that you can download, has a number of pages that deal with these figures in detail. But just before we get to the Q&A, I want to definitely leave time for questions and answers. What's on the screen now, Suzy, is just the total cost of the application. I mean, I don't think there's anything in there that's unusual. If there's anything you want to sort of pick out, but that's just pretty standard application for planning.
It is. There are a couple of things that people might sort of say, well, hang on, what's that all about? There are a lot of reports, obviously, because as I was saying before, we want to make sure that they can't turn around at the end of the summer and say, oh, we wanted a summer ecological survey. Well, they'll have that to start with. And they'll also have a winter one. So anything that we're covering our bases in risk mitigating by preparing everything they could ask for. Hence, there's a chunk in there for reports. We've got to have a historical consultation, check that what we're doing works with the listed buildings, etc. Part of the active house process is to make sure that it is all designed and worked out from the start, but also a planning permission with conditions attached is commercially useless. So you'll see in there that there's a fire plan for the timber construction. Well, that's because it is a requirement of the planning permission. So therefore, we'll do it. It's in there. So it's not going to be a condition that has to be resolved if the site is sold afterwards. It's there done. All of the bases hopefully are covered. And there's also a bit in there which talks about making the site safe to report on it and all sorts. Well, at the moment, we have listed buildings, we have long grass, we have big piles of timber, big piles of stone, all sorts. So if we need to do work in these areas in order to make sure that we can plan it properly, then I have a budget in there to do it with.
Yeah, okay. No, that's really good. So the total funds required for the raise, 155,266. It's all broken down. People can go and look at it in detail. And again, just to highlight, the projected ROI in this project is 50% per annum. So if the initial planning application is successful, then it'll be a 50% projected return. If there's an appeal and it takes a further 12 months, then there's an additional 50% per annum. So you could call it 50% per annum or 100% over 24 months is like the worst case scenario. So that's what we're looking at. If I just explain briefly here, and then we'll get some questions, Brenda, if you can line them up. If I just explain then the financials from the platform investor side. So the crowdfunding raise, as you can see, is 155,000. Dealing with the 12-month timeline, it's a 50% projected return on investment, which is 77,500. So effectively what Suzy will be doing is that the SPV has been set up. There will be C shares or crowd shares issued. So 1,550 of those shares, passive shares, are issued in the SPV. Those shares will cost £100 each. And if you take the overall projected profit potentially of what the land is worth after planning, that represents about 3.44%. Obviously, this is a planning uplift, and the real value is in achieving the plans. So the total funds returned to the investors is obviously 232,500, which is the initial crowd raise plus the projected ROI. So that's how that plays out. So effectively, investors are buying shares in Suzy's SPV at £100, and then all things being equal, Suzy's buying those back at a projected £150. Hence the 50% projected ROI. So that should explain the model, if you like. And then on this side, it's just an explanation as to what the land could be worth after planning, and obviously the type of profit that is available in the deal if the project goes to plan. So again, this is listed very heavily and detailed in the equity offer document, and there's an online form. You can also ask questions, and Suzy can answer those. So Brenda, I'll open up to you to deal with any of the questions, and then we'll finish off with the exit strategies.
Okay. I'll start probably with maybe just a quite straightforward one, Suzy. So someone has asked, how does the return on your investment work? I think David's probably just covered that. Do you get an annual return? So just a couple of sentences.
And it is explained in more detail in the offer document, and also how I've got my figures. There's a fair amount of the due diligence and where we've got values from and all sorts is in there too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to be clear on that, it's not the ROI is for the project. So if the project takes 10 months or obviously goes to 12 months, then the year one counts. There's no like return as you go along or anything like that. It's basically a profit share, effectively, if you want to call it that, if the value's increased. So just to be clear on that, it's an ROI based on the project. There's no returns as you go along or anything like that.
Okay, good. So another one, and again, we probably cover this on the platform with your extra documents that you provided, Suzy, but how many planning gain investment opportunities? Now they're specifically asking, have you had on the platform? But as your new fundraiser, this is your first one, but
it is.
They're saying, what's your success failure rate of these to date? And I know you have experience in these.
I do. I've done previously, it was my mum's technically, but obviously I was behind it, worked on it and did a lot of the work with her. We had a crowdfunding raise to buy the site last time. We didn't manage to get an option because it was town centre in Rugby. Everybody wanted it. So we bought the site through, using funds through crowdfunding, and we then secured the planning on it and sold it on for development. So the crowdfunding was paid back. So in essence, that was the same thing, but we'd had to buy the site rather than just having an option on it and paying for the planning.
Okay, and that leads then into the next one. Someone has asked, why job to go through crowdfunding, and have you done a viability feasibility study? But you're maybe familiar with this type.
Yeah, it's that's in the due diligence information which we've got loaded on there to have a look at. We've done a lot of work to make sure it's viable, because as experienced developers, and I advise other people on their developments and work with a lot of people as a project manager, so I'm even more careful for other people's, and this I see as that sense, because if I am asking people to help me to do this, then I have to be triply careful. So we've been very, very sure that we have checked this will work.
Good. Okay, so I need to just get back up here a little bit. So someone asked, and this has also been asked in the forum, so we'll just double back on this one. What if the council reduced the number of units you're allowed to build? So what if your planning application doesn't succeed for the number that you intended? At what point then would it not be a viable project for you?
Well, this is the beauty of the self-build plots. The councils have to provide self-build plots under government guidelines, and they struggle because nobody really wants self-builds in the middle of their development sites. They want your normal big developers have to provide them or do provide them, but people don't want to build those particular houses because they then are mandated to look the same as the ones around them. People who self-build want a sustainable house. They want a passive house or an active house. That's the whole point of self-building. So we believe that our self-build plots will have a unique selling point. The council have to provide them. And if all we get are the self-build plots and a few extra, the self-build plots actually pay, firstly, to buy the site, and secondly, for this equity raise. Therefore, if we get those, we're fine. There isn't actually a break-even point as such on how many others we get. That's the exciting bit.
Okay. Yeah, and then it leads into
Brenda,
someone said, do you intend to sell the self-build plots, 10 in total, or will? Go ahead.
Yeah, so sorry, just jump in there. So I'm just conscious of the clock. We would definitely want to try and get all these questions answered, but we'll try and do it like in like one sort of sentence, Suzy, if we can, so at least we can answer them. And then no, that's okay. No, it's just this is pretty normal for project webinars. You get a whole lot of questions,
and it's great.
And you literally could spend the next half hour, 40 minutes answering questions, which is great. But obviously we need to make sure we keep the time overall. But we also want to try and make sure that investors get their questions answered. So how we do it is we'll let Suzy kind of answer high level, one sentence, sort of answers to at least deal with the question. But then we'll follow up with more detailed questions, and we'll even add these questions to the forum. And then Suzy can answer in more detail, and people can get their questions answered. So go ahead, Bren.
Okay, so someone's just asking, is the initial target just to do the self-builds and get those completed? Is that what you had planned in your mind, or
no?
Are you going to develop?
the idea is that they are for people to do themselves should they choose to, but they are a very good income stream to enable us to buy the rest of the build. So the idea is that we develop the whole site as much as we have planning for, or we sell it to someone else who is even more keen than us to do it.
Okay, very good. So we have a question in from Lulabelle, who's one of our regulars, and she says, are you doing any consultation of your own before the planning application is submitted?
We already did.
Yeah,
we already did.
Okay, good. And again, you can read about that on the platform. Okay.
And really,
so
the media says it all, doesn't it? The media says it all at the moment, that this is what people want. This is what people are interested in. Okay.
So Jane has asked, what are your biggest concerns, risks around getting planning for phase 2? So that's it.
Well, because it's already in the neighbourhood plan, because they've previously had planning permission, it's not, and it's a brownfield site. It's not as though I'm saying, here's a beautiful green field full of trees, let me build on it. This is a blot on the landscape at the moment with a listed building that they're being climbed all over to do something about. And they understand that they need to offer some form of assistance to that listed building, because listed buildings aren't cheap to renovate. So the council are fully behind the development on this site. And we believe that because what we're doing is going to enhance the town and be so different and actually set North Taunton apart from the local development sites all round it, that they'll be really keen to do it. And we hope to start a trend in Devon.
Good. That sounds like a plan. Another investor has asked, what are the development team or the company investing in the Planning Uplift project? And then there's questions about split share of profit, which maybe we need to go into more detail in a written answer, because it's probably
I think that's
too detailed to talk about now.
Yeah, most of that information is already in there, isn't it? So
yeah,
it probably is in the documents, yes, but we could maybe give
I'll circle back on the finances as part of a wrap up and try and go over the finances again.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And again, there's another one on the 16k launch cost. So again, we'll answer that one in more detail in the financial side of it. Okay. And I think there's another question. What is the affordable housing requirement likely to be on the scheme? What a breakdown for that from the council?
Yeah,
are they insisting that you have so many units?
No, what my experts are telling me is that we will actually be able to offset financially, which is something we truly believe in. That if the schools or the green spaces and all sorts need the investment to be built, then the developers have they should be doing it. So what we will do is we will discuss with the council the best way to do this, but also the self-builds are again part of that. So it all in essence works out together. And because the listed buildings in phase 1 are part of it, again, they will help us to rescue the self-builds without penalising us on trying to do the new build development. That will actually help them with self-builds, help them with their listed building, and it will all come out together quite nicely. But if we need to supply affordable housing, we factored that into the figures, that it is fine, it still works.
Very good. And you've also that sustainability angle as well, and the environmentally friendly angle. So
exactly,
you're hitting all those buttons as well, which helps. Yeah. And we have another one just about the financial side of it, the ROI. So David, I think, is going to circle back and cover that again. So that's something, and we don't.
I'll also do the one above that. So I'll do
those are for you, David. Then those last couple.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Brenda. So I'll deal with that one as well. So I'll do the exit strategy. I'll reverse back and just again recover the financials, because it can be, when you hear it the first time, just trying to piece it together. And then we'll just need to finish off 5 minutes with registration. So in terms of the exits, Suzy, you're looking at really a combination of different ways you can potentially exit. I think your first strategy is to sell some of the self-build plots, and that exits the investors. You're not adverse to selling the whole site if that ends up being the most sort of lucrative plan for you.
And it will still work. It will still work because it's full planning permission. They will have to build what we have planning for. So it will still have to be sustainable, etc., because that's what we have planning for.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, phase 1 can be ongoing as soon as the project starts. So there is the possibility of creating some funds, some profit out of phase one that can obviously go back to the investors. And then you've got the off-plan sales reservations potentially, or really a combination of the above. So you have multiple ways to generate the income or the funds, if you like, to pay back the investors. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. So let me just quickly do the financials, and then I need to run through registration, and then Suzy can wrap up at the very end with her final comments. So in terms of financials, someone asked a question there: if the project fails, do I get my money back? The answer is no. This is one of the reasons why this is a 50% ROI. It's an attractive rate of return because the risk is higher, as I said at the start, to normal development type projects. So just to be clear on this, the investors are paying for the planning application. If planning is refused, well, then obviously there's no project going forward, and effectively those costs are not paid back. Now, they will still have a shareholding in the plot of land that doesn't have planning, so there'll be an element of value to the share, but it'll certainly not be the increased value in terms of achieving planning. So investors need to be very clear on the risk versus reward on this project. So it really is a little bit of all or nothing type investment. So again, just be clear, you've read the documentation, understand the risk versus reward before investing. Now, just very quickly on, someone's asked again about the 50% share, and if they were to invest £1,000, what's the numbers on that? So if someone invests £1,000 in this project, and within 12 months the planning is successful, then they get a projected 50% ROI. So they would get 1,500 back, effectively, as Suzy and her company buys back the shares in 12 months. If it then extends for another 12 months due to a planning appeal or maybe COVID or other delays, and the planning is then successful in a 2-year period, then an additional 50% for the second year is then paid out, which means £1,000 invested, 24 months of a project, £2,000 paid back. So hopefully that explains that clearly. Now, someone also asked, what's the correlation with the 3.44%? Well, that's just the 3.44% is equating to the 12-month projected ROI. So in terms of a shareholding, effectively what's happening is the shareholders are receiving a 3.44% profit share on the project. And that 3.44% equates to 77,500 as a percentage of the overall net profit. So that's a projected figure, obviously, because until the planning comes in and all the figures are done, but that's why that 3.44% is mentioned. So hopefully that clears that up. Again, it is explained in the offer document. So we're not going to have time, Suzy, to go through this tonight, but these are listed in your downloadable document. People have asked, yes, have you done planning before? And the answer is yes. You've done a number of successful planning projects, and we were going to give you a chance to run through some of these, but we've spent some good time going through the project, which is probably the most important thing tonight. So for sure, people can go on, download the document, and you can see not only these, but other examples of projects that Suzy has done and successfully achieved planning on. So you're by no means a novice, very, very experienced when it comes to planning, which is great. Yeah. Okay, so let me just in the last 5 minutes wrap this up, and then Suzy can have the last word regarding the project. So when you go on our homepage, you can find the thumbnail of the Old Woollen Mill. And once you click on that, you get to what we call the pitch pages. And there's an overview of the project. There's a summary of the financials. You can read about the team. And then there's a forum. I definitely want to highlight the forum, because when you click on that, you can see questions that investors have asked. And Suzy has answered those questions, which means everyone gets the benefit of those questions being answered. So this is one of the real benefits and why I love property crowdfunding and on platforms like this, because you get multiple eyeballs, you get crowd validation. You have people from all different backgrounds, experiences, looking at this information that Suzy's presented from their own perspective, asking questions, and obviously putting Suzy under pressure to explain her numbers, to explain her consultancy aspect and how she's arrived at this plan. And as she answers those questions, everyone gets the benefit of that, which helps you make a decision whether you feel this is an investment for you or not. So go on to the forums and participate, ask her questions. Let's keep Suzy really busy answering those questions, which she'll enjoy doing.
I like being busy.
Of course, absolutely. Your enthusiasm and your passion just never wanes for this project, which is fantastic. So in the middle of this pitch page, there's a register your interest box. Now, this is important for everyone on the webinar tonight. If you feel this is something that you may want to invest in and you're seriously considering investing, then you can leave an email address and an investment amount that you're considering investing. So those that haven't done that, I know many of you have already, but for those of you that haven't, then you can leave your details there, and that just lets Suzy and us sort of know the people that are looking at the project. Now, there's about 140,000 of registered interest so far in the project. It doesn't mean all of those people will definitely invest, but that's sort of the numbers. I think about 42 people have left their details so far, and we actually go live tomorrow at 12 noon. So if you're on here tonight, if you're thinking this is maybe something you want to do, then if you haven't already, fire your details in there, and Suzy and us will know that you're considering investing. So let me very quickly wrap up with the registration. If you haven't already and you want to register on our platform, that's our homepage. If you then click to register, you have to leave a name, an email address. You then have to do a confirmation. So go back to your emails, click the confirmation, and that lets you then into the site. If you've been referred by somebody or someone's recommended you, there's a box there where you can add the name of the person that recommended you or the organization that you belong to. You can insert that in there. It just helps us track. So now you have an account, but you cannot invest unless you're investor ready. So this is part of the compliance and regulation. Investors have to go through a process. First of all, you have to complete what's called an appropriateness test, and you're asked a series of multiple choice questions, just so you understand the nature of this type of investment. So it'll be questions like, is your capital at risk, or are you guaranteed to get a return? Obviously, we've explained there are no guarantees, capital is at risk. So there's a series of questions. You answer those questions, pass the test, and then you move on to what type of investor are you? So you may be a sophisticated investor, a high net worth investor, or maybe a retail investor. If you're not sure what you are, the chances are you're probably a restricted investor. But certainly if you're a high net worth, you'll understand what that means and be able to answer appropriately. So once you've designated yourself, you'll be asked to do anti-money laundering, to supply a proof of address, and then you'll receive an email, and this is very important. You'll receive an email that will tell you you have successfully completed the investor readiness assessment. So if you haven't received that email, it means you're not yet fully registered to invest. So if you haven't received that, contact the support. You'll get the email at the end, just in case there's been a KYC question or something like that. Sometimes a document isn't loaded up properly, or the passports maybe zoomed in too much, the full face, all the different things that can go wrong. But just make sure you receive notification that you're fully investor ready. So then you can obviously go in at that point and you can download then the full offer document. This project isn't live yet, so obviously we don't have the pages for Suzy's deal, so don't panic when you see the different picture on the left hand side. But when you decide to invest, you insert the amount of money that you want to invest. In this case, there'll be £100 shares, so it'll tell you how many units, how many shares that you're investing in. Then you move to payment, and you can choose to either do a bank transfer, in which case you'll receive a unique reference number, or you can move money direct onto your e-wallet and make the investment from your e-wallet on the platform. All handled by third-party payment provider. We, the platform, never handle your money, Suzy does not see any of your money until the end of the process, where each shareholder accepts the shareholder agreement, and only at that point are funds drawn down and forwarded then to Suzy's SPV. So it's a very transparent, straightforward process, and you control your own funds up until the point that you accept the shareholder agreement. And at that point, then you're confirming that you want to go ahead with the project. So the email address, Brenda, for support, you want to just shout that out, and then we'll let Suzy finish with a quick wrap up.
Yeah, I do indeed. Yes, it's support@leocrowdfunding.com. So just support before our name, basically. Just a few more wee comments. Lunabelle has come in and said, love this project, top job, Suzy. And there's another question about the return. So please send us an email to support@leocrowdfunding and we will answer for you. Okay, thank
Brilliant.
you.
So we've got 2 minutes, Suzy, to the hour. So you've got 30 seconds to have your last passionate pitch for your project.
Well, I think it comes back to what you said at the very beginning about learning. There are an awful lot of different planning projects, but one that involves listed buildings, brownfield site, all of the ecology reports and all sorts that could potentially be asked for, flood risk, all of that, which you have to do on even small things. We will be doing them all. So it is actually a very good learning opportunity, which will cover most things apart from greenfield site, because that's the only thing we won't be doing.
Okay, fantastic. Listen, absolute pleasure, Suzy, tonight. Thank you for coming on tonight. I think you've done a fantastic job, so really well done.
Thank you.
Not only do you have the passion and enthusiasm, but you've clearly got the background, the knowledge. I can still have pictures of you on that roof there, maybe doing your roofing experience and walking around carrying bricks as a bricklayer. But listen, that's how you learn the trade. And I think
and you learn health and safety, David, because one of the stories you haven't heard is a wooden ladder carrying an armload of blocks and the ladder broke.
That's for another conversation. That's another conversation for another day. But no,
20
fantastic.
Years ago that was.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fantastic. So again, remind everyone, we go live tomorrow at 12 noon with this project. So again, it's entirely up to yourself if you think this is a project for you. Some people like to kind of sit on the sidelines and wait and see what happens. Our last project, and again, just to be really clear, some projects can take a few weeks to fund. So I want to be really clear on that. We have had some projects that have funded in 1 day. And certainly our last projects last week funded in 9 hours. So I'm just saying, if you're interested in this project, keep an eye on it from 12 o'clock and just make sure that if you want to be in it, then you're aware of how it's filling up to the maximum of 155. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Get on the forums if you have any more questions. Contact the support email that Brenda's given you. Thank Brenda for tonight coming on after hours and dealing with the questions. With that, we'll let everybody go. Stay safe, and hope above all you're successful in your property investment. All the best, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, everyone.